Hey, this is Corey Barnes.
And this is Lisa Caperton, and you're listening to Her Turn to Talk.
Good day.
Good morning, Corey.
Good morning, Lisa.
How are you?
I am content.
That's good. It's a Sunday morning, so I feel like it's a little, for me, it feels like a lazy Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I'm a little like...
Feeling a little slow.
Yeah.
Not sluggish, it just...
Drink some more coffee.
Nothing...
How many cups of coffee is
I'm
that?
not tired either. This is my second.
All right. Maybe you need about 2 more.
Maybe. I'm not tired. I'm just not... I'm just am.
You just are. I have weird news that I read about. I didn't read the whole article, but I just saw like a piece of it.
Yeah.
And it was that there is a woman who's having a 3rd surgery because she is trying to get a Barbie vagina.
Oh.
What is that? Wouldn't that just be nothing?
How did you find this? Where did you find this?
I don't know. It was.
Where's your source?
It was a Facebook thing. I was just going through Facebook and I clicked on it, and it was
a Barbie vagina. Barbie doesn't have a vagina.
That's
so
what
what
I
does
was
that
thinking.
fucking mean?
Isn't it just a smooth? I don't know. Does it just? I'm so confused. There's no. Yeah.
There's no
it's just
urethra. There
smooth,
is no.
Right? Have they updated Barbie since we were little?
No,
Are
she
they
doesn't have any
anatomy
details as
appropriate
far as
now?
I know.
It's insane.
I hope she goes for a Barbie butt and sews up her butt crack.
Oh my God.
A Barbie vagina.
I don't know what it means. If anybody out there, if you know what it means, let us know.
Yeah, that's just a smooth mons pubis that just goes and goes. Connects to your butt.
I don't know.
Good luck on peeing and having any intercourse with your Barbie vagina.
It sounds miserable, whatever it is. But I have a question, and I have not looked this up. I do not know if this is true. Maybe we can look it up right now. But I was talking to a friend last night, and I was actually talking about how I was talking about gray hair and all of that issue on the show. And she said, well, when you go through menopause, it's supposed to all just fall out, so you won't have to worry about that. And then I thought, well, that's even worse.
Really?
Because then it's just going to be like old, wrinkly, like
that's true.
a Sphinx cat.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true. In my experience in
and looking
like
at
CNA work,
postmenopausal.
No, well, with
no, yeah, you did that work, and they had full bushes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not like vibrant and whatever. Again, everything was white, but it was there.
Okay.
My grandma,
definite
I was
foliage
saw
down
that
there.
Stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything just falls out.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I hadn't looked it up.
My mother has reported leg hair is not as significant.
So maybe the pubic hair just thins out?
Yeah, I think it's a thinning out thing. Well, everyone's different, I'm sure.
Maybe. So maybe some people's falls out. Okay. Healthline.net.
Well, is she experiencing this? Is that why?
No. She's nowhere close to that.
I was going to say, she's not.
It says, as you age, your pubic hair, just like the hair on your head, will naturally start to thin and turn gray. Part of the aging process includes hair loss and the slowing of the rate of hair growth. So maybe it doesn't necessarily all fall out, but it just gets
I'm bald. That's what I always dreamt of.
She was like, oh, then you won't have to worry about getting a bikini wax. I'm like, well, who wants to see it at that point anyway? Then you want the hair to cover.
Oh my god. Oh,
anyways,
thank you. That's funny. It is.
Good morning. Are you more awake now?
Yes. Thank you. I needed a good laugh.
I just didn't know. Well, I'm glad that you know from your experience.
Oh, I'll never forget
you've
it.
You've seen them, so you know. You'll never forget.
How could you? How could you? It was a moment in time.
Okay, I have a badass woman. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait a second. Weren't we going to talk about something else?
What else were we going to talk about?
Well, we were talking about prior to going live?
No, we're going to talk about that with our guest.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
With our guest.
Who's our guest?
Well, I'm going to tell you about our guest, but first I'm going to tell you about my badass woman. Because
Oh.
They relate in a little ways, meaning that they come from the same country. So my badass woman is a British ultra runner, Sophie Power. Her name is Sophie Power. And she ran the UTMB while breastfeeding. And it's amazing. So this is from Runner's World. And so she took on, it's supposed to be one of the toughest ultra races that there is. It's through the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc race. So this is, up in the mountains, crazy race. And she was breastfeeding her 3-month-old along the way. And they even have pictures of her at certain stations where she's breastfeeding him in one hand and pumping in the other. And she was saying at one point there was a space between, so she normally would feed her son like every 3 hours. And at one point it took her 16 hours to get to a certain area. And so she was having to just express with her hands like while running this race, because you haven't experienced this yet, but if you ever do, it's really painful when your boobs start to fill up and then they swell. And if you don't have something to release that, then, you got to do what you got to do. It doesn't matter. And she talks about like these races, there's no shame. There's no, you're going pee on the side. You don't care. You're just trying to get that shit done. But she says, I couldn't raise my heart rate too much as my body isn't primed to burn fat. I couldn't fully run down hills to protect my pelvis. In a typical race, I would get in and out of the aid stations as quickly as possible. But here I had to focus on keeping down enough food for me and for her baby and then resting. Because she's, so just imagine the physiology that's going on in your body to keep up with a race like that, but also being able to produce milk, and you've just had a baby 3 months ago. It's amazing. It's I don't know. I just thought that was something I read about her and I thought she's a badass, because a lot of people, not even just men, just people are like, oh, you had a baby, you don't need to be doing anything or whatever. And she's out there kicking ass.
Yep.
So she did the UTMB is an ultra marathon, and it's a lot of hiking because you're going, over like 10,000 meters. So
that is pretty incredible.
Yeah. So
unthinkable.
Yeah. And there's lots of other women out there doing these things now. And I just, in sports. And
I was going to say, this wasn't just out of the blue. She decided, this is her career. It sounds like this is,
you don't just decide to get up and go run this one day.
Exactly.
But there's other women out there doing races and, in track and field and all of these different sports that are proving just because you become a mom doesn't mean you have to stop doing what you do. And it doesn't mean you have to stop doing what you love. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you need to do, whether you're breastfeeding, whether you're on your period, probably even if you're going through menopause, like it doesn't matter. Like women are badasses.
Yeah, just keep doing what you were doing before
right.
any
you're
of that happened.
Badass already for giving birth. Like that's badass. Our bodies can do that.
Unthinkable from my perspective. I just can't even. I have no idea.
So Sophie Power is her name. She is a British woman.
Sophie Power.
And I picked her in part because today we have our own very special, very awesome British invasion happening. My good friend, I love her very much, Claire Tanner, is going to come talk to us. And Claire recently, a little over a year ago, moved to the United States from the UK. And she's had a very interesting experience. And I know we've spent time with our families together, and we've had a lot of fun learning about each other's cultures and just learning about the different foods. Like we could do a whole podcast on the different foods. And I think she's a joy to speak with and listen to her accent. But even more than that, she's one of the nicest people I've ever met with the biggest hearts. And she has brought that to America, and she's come here and she's out there volunteering and helping others. And that's just who she is and what she does. I think anywhere she goes, she's going to look for someone to help, and I think she's really awesome. And I think our listeners are going to love listening to her. So without further ado, our interview with Claire. Hi, Claire.
Hi, guys.
How
Hello.
are you?
Good.
I'm so
thank you.
excited to have you here. I've been telling my friends, you guys haven't met yet, but I've been telling them all about you and how excited I am for you to come on the show.
She's been raving about it.
So no pressure.
no pressure.
pressure
Don't let me
whatsoever.
down.
And we met just yesterday and barely talked about this at all, didn't we? We had a couple of cooking disasters. So the cooking disasters overtook everything
We've
else
tried,
we did.
we tried making some crumpets, which, do you know what a crumpet is? Because I did not know what a crumpet
tell me what
is
a
until
crumpet
I
is.
went to
It's
England.
I kind of like, I guess what you guys would call an English muffin, but it has more holes in it and you bake it on a griddle. And it does not respond well to altitude.
Interesting.
Or I'm not even sure what went wrong yesterday. I mean, it just went everywhere. And my poor husband, who was in charge of the baking.
They're
I think-
delicious, and I don't understand why we don't have them here in America.
No.
Think of it as like if an English muffin and a pancake had a baby, then that baby would be a crumpet.
Yeah, with these lovely
muffin and a what?
holes.
And a pancake.
And a pancake, but it has these holes in that butter drips through. I mean, it feels like it would be a great American.
Yeah.
It looks beautiful.
Snack.
Yeah.
Oh, you
They
have a
look
picture?
delicious.
Yeah, it's delicious. But yesterday it did not go well. So luckily the friendship and the company made up for the fact that we then had to go out and eat Chinese food because there was nothing to eat. Even the brownies were a bit funny, weren't they? So.
But we've had a great time. So, for our listeners, Claire, you are new to the U.S.,
Yes.
fairly new. So, tell
Yes.
us about what that was like moving to the U.S. and where are you from originally?
We moved here just over a year ago. My husband's work brought us here. He works in IT, so there's a big kind of IT community here in Denver. We lived before that in Canterbury, which is the far southeast, about as close to France as you can get in the United Kingdom. And we lived there for about 15, 20 years. We both met at college there. We stayed there. I'm originally from Oxford, so explains the very flat accent for anyone who's listening who's British, and I've got a very flat British accent. But
I think it's lovely.
So we moved here a year and a month ago. A big move, bigger than we expected. It's been just as amazing and at times just as awful as we expected it to be. And I am not working for the first time since I was 14, which is a very long time ago. And it's been a big adjustment, but a fantastic adjustment. And I think living here with the mountains as I was driving here today, it makes it so much easier to be somewhere beautiful, because however tough day-to-day life is, you just lift your eyes and you think, okay, no, I'm somewhere beautiful. So it makes that little bit easier.
Right. And you have a little girl, so it's you, your husband, and your little girl.
Absolutely.
And what was that decision like of, okay, do we want to make this commitment? And I know that originally you were going to move here for a year, and that has now been extended. But what was that talk like of, okay, are we going to uproot our life and all we know, our friends, our family, and move, across the pond, so as they say?
And we don't like change. We're not typically people who like change. We traveled a lot. I traveled an awful lot with my family. I was really blessed to have parents who took us all around the world. And was more, I suppose, interested in living elsewhere than Ben was. But he'd always said, no, I'd like to stay. And then the company he works for brought him here a lot. So the last 3 or 4 years, maybe he'd be gone for up to a month at a time. And that was fine, but tough. And when you're working full time and single parenting, it was pretty tough. And then he floated the idea of coming. And I said, absolutely not. There is no way I am dumping my career, upheaving Millie, who's our daughter, and she's had quite a few health problems. So I was worried about uprooting her for that reason as well. And he said, well, how about you just come for a vacation? So in June 2018, we came out. Danny and Lisa took us up into the mountains, and it was beautiful. And we then thought a lot about it. And I was beginning to feel a bit burnt out in the UK. I'd gone back to work very quickly after Millie was born, working, and was thinking, I wonder what it would be to literally turn our lives upside down. And then we're Christians, so we prayed a lot about it, prayed a lot with friends, talked to family who were really supportive. And then we decided to do it. And that's when the stress really started of suddenly shoving things into shipping containers, putting our house on the market, doing various different things.
And it took a while for all your stuff to get here. So I remember you were in America, in a strange land to you, in a house that you're not used to, and you had none, not very many of your belongings.
I mean, I wish I'd had the tour that our shipping container had. It went to Liverpool in the UK, which is where the stuff goes, and it came across to New York, went straight back to Liverpool again, appears to have been packed into an entirely different container because it was a very different colour when it arrived. It went to Chicago, it then went to Texas, and eventually, several months later...
Is that normal?
No, we have no idea what happened.
Oh my, several months later?
Several months later. So we were originally in corporate housing, and then we found this great house, and we just took the decision to say, you know what, we have nothing, and we'll move into this empty house, and we went to IKEA and bought the bare minimum, and we lived. And it was one of the most kind of instructional times because we had nothing. And with the exception of a few toys for Millie, the suitcases we'd brought with us, and it was easier than we ever thought possible. And we, since then, when the shipping container arrived, just put loads of it in the basement and have sold so much of it because we realised how much we didn't need, actually.
Yeah.
But also just neighbours, kids from school. I remember Thanksgiving break, we'd moved in and Millie had very few toys, and all of a sudden all of these families just came with toys for Millie to play with over Thanksgiving break, and it was just such a lovely introduction to the US. But yeah, that was a bit stressful. I'm wondering whether we would ever see our stuff again. And we love books, we're readers, and the thought of losing 1,000 books was at times stressful. But after a while, it was something we just thought, well, if it comes, it comes. If not, it was... now I look back, I'm sure I've got rose-tinted glasses on, but it was tough at the time. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what has your experience been like here in America? Like the ups and the downs as far as how people have treated you?
Oh, I mean, I feel so sorry for Americans who go to live in the UK because we're quite a stoic, conservative, private people. And from the moment we came, people could not have been more interested in where we were from, more welcoming. Neighbours came round with crockery, with cutlery, with bed sheets, offered to put my parents up at Christmas if our shipping container hadn't arrived by the time they came out. And we've been made to feel so, so, so welcome. I think having a daughter helps because you're immediately in after-school activities and you're in school and that kind of thing. There's so much we love about the US. We've both put on a bit of weight because of your amazing food.
Yeah, tell us about the amazing food that you love, because I know you love Chick-fil-A.
We love Chick-fil-A.
I do too.
What is it?
Love
Pecan pie. Like, there's some different things.
Everything. Well, we were blessed to have Thanksgiving with Lisa and Danny last year. And I mean, what you do with sweet potatoes and marshmallows, oh my goodness. And I thought it was dessert, but apparently that's not dessert. That's just, you just pop that on the side of the turkey. Your ice creams, I mean, the range. One of the first places we went when we got here was Park Meadows Mall down in Highlands Rancho, Colorado. And it was just, the range of Ben & Jerry's flavors was amazing. But the flip side of that was I didn't realize how important food was to making you feel at home and comforting. And those first pangs of homesickness, I burst into tears in King Soopers because I couldn't find what it was I was looking for. And as someone who I thought was quite robust, and I was like, what is wrong with you? You're crying over not being able to find these ingredients. And it just made me realize quite how home is wrapped up in food and smells and tastes and that kind of stuff. So that is both a great thing, and I've now found a good place to import stuff. So this Christmas, I'm happy that I can make the stuff that I wanted to make last year. I think the tough side, definitely the homesickness. And for me, that double change of becoming a stay-at-home mum. And I think some of that would have been tough in the UK as well, missing out on the teamwork, missing out on the different sense of purpose, that routine of getting up, going out to work, doing different things. And that, to begin with, along with the culture shock and everything else, was quite tough. But I've picked up lots of volunteering and the space. In fact, just last night, my husband and I were talking about what it would be like if I went back to full-time work here. And the space that it's given us as a family to get to know people, to build a life here, and just to slow the pace down is something that I think if we went straight back to the UK tomorrow, we probably wouldn't go. This has taught us so much about the pace that our family needs. So that's been,
Because
really
I know in the
interesting.
UK, you were working full time, your husband was working full time, and your husband had to take a very long train commute. So
Absolutely.
there was not a lot of time left for family time.
No, he would be gone at 7 a.m. at the kind of latest. He'd be home at the earliest, 7:30 in the evening. When Millie was born, it was worse. He was gone at 6 a.m., not back till 9 p.m. I was working often kind of 4 or 5 days, sometimes 5 days crammed into 4, then stepped it down a little bit. But it was a tough balance. And we didn't have much time to do hiking, fun stuff, take Millie to do the stuff she really enjoys to do, horse riding. Both she and I are big horse riders, so we're learning Western style, which is amazing here. But it just didn't give us much time to even to think and stop and make those decisions about your family. Is this really what we want to be doing? Is this the direction we want to be heading in? Whereas here we can really sit back and, the spaces. And we're very, I don't underestimate how lucky we are. And for a lot of people, that's not the case. But for us right now, the space this has given us, I think it's definitely changed the entire trajectory of our lives. Now we know what we need. We'll probably make other changes to keep it that way.
Are there some things? So you mentioned like you're learning about Western riding.
Oh, I love it.
Are there what other changes? Is there anything that you found odd or different or strange? Or I'm interested in some of those things.
We just love being here. So we've really got into country music. When we were here on that first vacation, we were listening to the Garth channel on Sirius XM. We got really So we went to see Garth at the Mile High Stadium. We've been to see Joe Nichols. We have been to loads of country music events. We absolutely love that. We're huge rodeo fans. So Millie has been mutton busting.
Yes.
Have you seen that before?
Yes.
So
it's my favorite part of the rodeo.
She is a huge mutton busting fan. We came out in that summer. Ben signed her up for mutton busting, and I thought, over my dead body, are you putting my child on a sheep in front of hundreds of people? And I was very secure in the fact that there's no way she would get on a sheep. So I was like, okay, you put the mask on, you put the body protector on. She's going to freak out and we're going to have to take her off. She didn't freak out. I almost had a stroke. She climbed onto the back of the sheep. Off she went and has been addicted to it ever since. And it's for a kid who found the transition not as easy as we were expecting, and at times has really said, I can't do this. I just can't do this. This is too much. We've been able to say to her, you've ridden a sheep in front of 600 people. You absolutely can do this. You've climbed waterfalls, you've been rock climbing, you've done all of this kind of stuff. So that side of life we've really embraced. There are certain things that we are amazed about the US. Your love of convenience. Amazing. Drive-through pharmacies.
We were just talking last night, and they're like, oh, yeah, we have 500, pill bottles of Tylenol and ibuprofen. They're like, we can't get that in the UK. I was like, what do you mean you can't?
So we can buy only packets of 16. So 16 of acetaminophen or ibuprofen. And so if your whole family's sick, it can be quite challenging to get enough. So when we got here and you could buy 500
you just go to Costco and you could get a ton.
I remember walking around Walgreens, maybe our third day, so still jet lagged. And I must have terrified the poor woman because I was just like hoarding all of this stuff and putting it in my basket, and just came to the checkout with, 500 Tylenol, 500 ibuprofen, Neosporin, this amazing cream that has antibiotics in it, just amazing. So the availability and range of medication, NyQuil and nothing like it exists in the UK. So my first experience with NyQuil, I thought, I don't know what I thought would happen. I woke up 15 hours later terrified about what had gone on in my absence. But the convenience, the amazing customer service, the willingness of people to speak to you. There are certain cultural things that are different. So politically, things here are quite different. There are issues here that are real push-button issues that I suppose in the UK, at least at the political level, we've put to bed. So maybe abortion, capital punishment, guns. And we were maybe 8 months in, 7 months in to being here, when in the space of possibly 6 weeks, there was they closed down the school district because of threats to school children from a woman with a gun. And then maybe just a month later, there was the STEM shooting, which was
in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it was less than a mile and a half away from where we live. And I think that was probably one of the most culturally challenging moments for us, coming from a country where we had a school shooting in, I think, maybe the mid-90s in an elementary school. And we'd already had very tight gun laws. And then from that point onwards, from that one school shooting, had the tightest gun laws in the world. And to wrap our heads around that, to explain to Millie what school shootings meant, what her lockdown drills were. And I think it was the day that they locked the school down before they then closed the school the next day. And I went to get her from reception and I couldn't keep hold of her. And she ran across the school playing field in a zigzag motion, and I couldn't catch up with her. When I finally caught up with her, I said to her, what are you doing? What are you? And she said, oh, one of my friends said that it's harder to shoot you if you're running in a zigzag pattern. And I thought, okay.
And she's 6.
She was 6 at that point. Yeah. And I said, oh, wow. Okay, so we came home and we had a chat about that, because it's not even on your radar in the UK. No one has guns. Most police officers don't have guns. So it was in that way, and that was one of the moments when we did sit down as a couple and say, do we still want to be here? Is this, we knew
I don't blame you, right?
Yeah, if we knew theoretically about the risk, but this is a mile and a half away.
And you just moved here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think then the sort of stats for Colorado in general are quite high.
Yeah.
And we mulled it over, prayed about it, talked about it. But it was a good chance for us to have those deeper conversations, right? You try to then with your children say, well, you explore the reasons people might do that. We talk about the differences. But I'm not going to lie, that was one of the, shall we just get back on the plane moments. But those are hugely outweighed by every time we go into the mountains or snowshoeing or riding in the Rockies or just enjoying that really good Ben and Jerry's or everything.
What was your experience with root beer?
I told her about that.
What is that stuff? I was expecting it to be like ginger beer and I think Millie liked it. I think she quite liked it. It was, but I think unfortunately we have a medicine that Ben and I had in the UK that obviously was made with very similar ingredients and that was probably forced on us as children. So unfortunately we were very much.
So they were at our house for our listeners and we gave them root beer and they just about spit it all over the table. They were like, this is disgusting.
Absolutely. Unlike most of the things that Danny and Lisa have given us, which have been amazing. Yeah. So pumpkin pie, the fondue we did, lots of things. And it's funny.
We've gotten lots of great things from you because you have introduced us to the wonderful sticky toffee pudding that is the best thing on the planet. And custard in a can. I didn't know that they had custard in a can.
Yes, yeah, and any British listeners will be shaking their heads because in the UK, custard in a can is really
and you have taught me how to properly make tea and how to do the sugar and how to do the milk. Yeah. So I know now how to have a proper tea setting and how to make it. And you've taught us about cake forks and teaspoons.
I think one of the loveliest things has been that kind of cross-cultural sharing of just day-to-day stuff. It's fun. One of my best friends here, we meet every Friday, and so she said to me, okay, bring tea. I'm going to make tea. And she tried to microwave tea for me. And I just couldn't understand what she was doing. She was putting a tea bag in water and putting it in the microwave. And I took a deep breath. I didn't know her that well at this stage. And I said, just stop. And I don't think I even used my kind, friendly voice. I think I used my the kind of stopping your children running across the road voice. I was like, stop! What on earth are you doing? And the concept, any British person who sees that happen, it's just, I mean, it's almost like tearing the Queen's head.
Yeah.
It's like tearing
I can feel that myself, actually.
Well, you should have seen Claire's face when we asked her about iced tea. And she was like, what are you talking about?
Right?
No, I mean, what? Why would you do that? It's like, why would you take something beautiful and trash it. But so at my friend's house, I said, look, stop. We just need to stop and go back to basics. So we need to get a saucepan, fill it with water, get it to a proper rolling boil.
There you go.
Then and it's harder, of course, at altitude anyway, because water boils at a different temperature. But so we have all of our friends come over, we make them pots of tea, and it's just that lovely, it's almost like a ceremony now where you get the teapot out and you pour it for people and you take the time and you really do sit there. And I mean, life stops in the UK for a cup of tea. And I think it's a really nice way of marking a point in friendship, a point in the working day. And so it's been really nice to do that. And then things like sticky toffee pudding, which in the UK is popular, but here every American I've given sticky toffee pudding to. Obviously, there's something about its taste for the American palate.
Like
it's
just like gold. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think we were planning our Thanksgiving menu, weren't we, yesterday? And Lisa's husband was very sad when I suggested we replaced sticky toffee pudding with something else. So I think we're just going to have to do it straight away. But it's funny how much food means so much. And here, of course, you guys have a lot more things allowed in your food. So I don't know if maybe I did text you, Lisa, but my daughter ate some birthday cake and I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast when she's older, it dyed her butthole bright green.
Yeah, I remember.
And I had, I baked a lot in the UK and used all different food colorings. This has never happened. And your kids have their tongues dyed. But it dyed her butthole green and I couldn't get this off. And I was thinking, should I be using nail varnish remover? But that feels a bit harsh. So then I called some friends. I called her pediatrician saying, clearly she's been poisoned in some way because her whole colon and intestine must be dyed green because everything that was coming out was
green.
Vicious. But her actual butthole was green. And no one was particularly surprised by this. And I was so I now import food colorings. But of course, there's 1,400 chemicals that you guys are allowed in your food that in the European Union, of course, we're not allowed. So we had a lot of stomach problems and headaches, hyperactive children.
Interesting.
When we first got here as well. But the green butthole, I think it was like maybe a month after we arrived was just...
I have experienced the green poop before after cake.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's the green poop, but enough to dye you.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
so
I
wild.
examined that part.
Yeah. Eventually, apparently soaking in a bath of baking soda was what eventually seemed to, and just the passage of time.
That's a life hack right there.
It is a life hack right there. But there have been a number of conversations like this, at least when I have had it, and I've just been like, what is happening?
We had an interesting one last night, and I haven't told Corey yet. We did. We talked about it a little bit. But I thought this was so interesting.
Yeah.
That in the UK, you do not circumcise your boys, and it's very common here in the US.
Yeah.
So we had a whole discussion around this, how you have never seen one that's a penis that's not circumcised, or that is circumcised, and I hadn't seen one that isn't. And just how strange that is.
It really is. So I was at a party just a month ago. So, I've gone a whole year.
Kind of party?
A 3-year-old's birthday party before we go any further. And there was a mother there with a newborn, and I was just asking how he was doing. And she said, and his circumcision scar is healing really well. I took a double take and I thought, maybe they're Jewish. But then I don't really know much about this. So I said, circumcision. And it became clear that everyone in that conversation had their male children circumcised. And I said, why do you do this? Because is it cultural? Is it surgical? And most people said, we just do it. It's what's been happening. And in the UK, as far as I know, not having boy children, but I don't know a single parent of a son who's circumcised their child. And we just happened to kind of be talking more generally yesterday about this kind of thing and why you would do it, and whether it's because of family reasons, cultural reasons.
It's a great question.
And boys being ridiculed if they don't have it done. And then when they enter their first sexual relationships, what girls will think of them. And I was saying, those are a lot of the arguments that are used in certain cultures and communities for FGM, for female genital mutilation.
I never thought about it
like
which
that.
is absolutely a thing.
A lot of people don't know about it.
And which is obviously horrific. And I was saying, so actually, there's not the biggest leap maybe between, mutilating your girls and mutilating your boys. And so we were just thinking about it, and we were having a good chat about it. And then we were saying, I've literally never, not that my experience is particularly broad in this area, but I did actually do a Google search last night.
did
Lisa.
too.
Did you?
I wouldn't know what
we
to do with
talked
it. What
about
do you
it.
do with it? I don't know.
Well, that's what we were talking about, because here in
Absolutely.
America, and we even pulled my son and asked, like, in your, because he's recently taken human growth and development and these health classes, like, in your textbook, what do they show? Because I don't remember ever seeing an uncircumcised penis in anatomy textbooks.
Because anatomically,
And they're not.
correctly, I guess, it exists.
Right.
But it sounds like in
So,
your textbooks,
yes.
it's
Yes,
gone.
in the U.S., they're all uncircumcised. And I think Danny looked up these statistics last night, because we were both like looking last night.
Absolutely.
And it was like 1 in 8 men in the UK are circumcised. So 1 in 8.
Okay.
But it's basically the opposite here.
Yeah. Okay.
But we did read, and I don't remember what the statistics are,
catching
that they're actually coming down, that less and less people are circumcising their boys. And like, I do know people who more recently, because I had my boys, 11, 13 years ago, but I do have friends now, or people that I know now, that are not circumcising. So I
Yeah.
do think it's becoming more common to not circumcise.
Yeah. But
Which
I
is
can
interesting. And I never thought about it in that way. And it got me and Danny talking when we got home. We're like, oh my gosh, like, did we buy into this whole thing? And we did this, did we do this horrible thing to our kid? Did we mutilate them? And it makes you think of like, oh, what I know now, what I've done, would I do it again? And I don't know. And we were like, I don't know that I would do that again.
It's funny, isn't it?
know?
Because the cultural pressure, because it's very easy for us to stand outside of someone's culture and say, why do you do that? That's
Exactly.
crazy. But then when you have those conversations, you think, well, the cultural pressure, and particularly around finding partners, and you can understand with FGM why, when it's been a very long culture, why breaking and necessarily breaking a very unhealthy cultural practice can be so hard, because your mother has it done, your sisters, your aunts, your godparents, all of this. And well, what if, I can't find a husband for my daughter because no one will accept her, they'll see her as unclean. So it's those kind of cultural stereotypes that you're then really trying to turn over. But every time I've had this conversation, because obviously once I found that out, I was asking everyone. I was like, hey, did you do this? Did you do this? It was really, really interesting. And I imagine that 1 in 8 in the UK, obviously we have a very multicultural population in the UK, a high level of first, second or third generation immigrants from a very wide range of places. And I would imagine that 1 in 8 is more than likely people who are first, second, third, fourth generation migrants to the UK, more likely, because for a British male to have that done, I imagine would be very unusual. But
That's
this
so
was
interesting. And that's
a
the
year
thing
in to understand this was quite strange.
And where would I ever have this conversation with somebody else? Like, I would not have known this.
Is the FGM happening when they're older, though? This isn't happening when they're born.
No, FGM, it can happen. There's a huge range of FGM practices that take place in different cultures, different communities across Asia, across Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. And I think the entrance into puberty or just before puberty tends to be when it happens. And certainly in the UK, our Home Office had a task force where if girls were being removed from school and taken back to maybe their original traditional home countries over the summer vacation, either for marriage or for FGM, teachers were to be on the lookout for this kind of thing happening, because we could put a block on them being taken there. In a small minority of cases, it happens at birth or relatively young, but yet it tends to happen. And we were talking about this last night, about the additional trauma that brings around mutilation and essentially what must feel like torture. Whereas obviously here it happens when kids are younger, but. Yeah, it's a whole topic that we just came across while we were making our crumpets and drinking our tea yesterday. I felt like maybe we should have been having a glass of like something a little stronger, or at least just, maybe. But funnily, I mean, the kids, luckily they closed their ears off, didn't they? I think.
Yes. We did that. We did try to pull my son and ask him, and he was like, I don't want to talk about this with you guys. We're like, okay, you can go.
But it is interesting how I think think, yeah, we
Right.
different cultures experience those kind of things.
Well, and it opens my eyes to just how we look at different cultures and different traditions of different people. And it makes me open my eyes to see how I see other people and to think like, oh, it probably, this closed-minded American thinking of, well, we do this, and so this is the right way, or this is the normal way. Well, it's normal to me. But then to have you come in and be like, what are you doing to your children? And then it made me like, whoa. But then I have my son who's like, oh, I want to go to these other countries and try. I want to eat guinea pig and I want to eat dog because that's what they eat there. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? It's, and that's the same thing. It's
exactly
just,
the same thing.
It's just like looking at different things, and it's like that. No, I don't necessarily have the right to say that, obviously in, certain circumstances like the female, mutilation, that is, in my opinion, wrong. But what's something, I don't know. If somebody wants to eat a guinea pig, I guess I can't say that's wrong, even though I feel like it's wrong in my heart.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that the more you experience different cultures, and I was here only a few weeks, and I think happily Americans are often much more open about things than the British. So the questions people would ask me or things they would tell me about themselves. I remember having a chat with a woman in the playground about some plastic surgery she'd just had. And it was our first conversation. And I remember thinking, you don't know me. Why are you telling me these? And it was lovely. And for her, it was a way of opening up and being very... So I think those different cultural experiences, the more you hear, the more you're exposed to, the more it does make you question your own practices as well and say, well, actually, maybe we can make tea another way. Maybe microwaving tea is okay, or maybe being a bit more open or seeing things a different way.
Well, and I wonder, I think sometimes, being an American, we sometimes are in a bubble here, admittedly, and we're not as close to other countries, and so I don't know, we just don't hear about them.
I think you're also an incredibly large country, and obviously coming from Europe, where we've got such a history of being very close, having people moving backwards and forwards between countries. We come from Canterbury, so a very multicultural city. It has 3 universities, very close to the English Channel, so we have the French border there. So we hear many different languages in our city. We experience living alongside many different cultures. There's a mosque in our town. There's a whole range of different cultures. And so you're less isolated, I suppose, from the experience of others, whereas in such a large country and such a less densely populated country as well, I think you can choose to live where is best for you around people who are similarly minded. You don't necessarily have the diversity that perhaps other countries do so close. Yeah. So I think it's less of a mindset and more perhaps just a geographical reality.
I'm interested, what do British, and I know this is coming from your opinion, you don't speak for all of the UK.
Definitely not.
But what is kind of like the general thought on Americans? And you can be good or bad. It doesn't, I'm just interested.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think culturally, Americans are so dominant. So in terms of Hollywood, and you think Facebook, Google, you have a dominion over so many global brands, Coca-Cola, or sadly not Chick-fil-A. I mean, delighted to see Chick-fil-A become a little bit more broad. But I think there's sometimes a confusion, and that's often with your politics. Mm-hmm. There's a confusion around the choices that people make. There's a confusion also around issues that are really big to you guys. So I think in most of Europe, for example, things like abortion, the death penalty, gun control, and I mean, that's a big one. There's a lack of understanding about how there's an acceptance still of gun ownership, why abortion is quite such a big political issue.
So is abortion allowed in the UK?
Yeah, okay. and in most of Europe, there are a few countries which have traditionally Catholic heritage, where abortion until very recently has been either illegal or very taboo. There's recently been a vote in the Republic of Ireland, and there's still a debate over Northern Ireland and abortion there. But yeah, abortion is legal.
So it's very much pro-choice.
Yeah, and I think speaking as a Christian, I think in Christian communities in the UK, obviously abortion is seen as a very sad occurrence, but as a political issue, so whether it should be illegal,
Right.
that's never been part of a political debate. And we're entering a general election on the 12th of December. So we have a current campaigning period in the UK right now. And there are issues here that would just never come up. So an abortion obviously is one of them. Gun control obviously is another. But I think also debates around taxation. So we have a socialised healthcare system, and that's one of obviously the huge differences. And when Europeans and the Brits particularly are at the moment talking about leaving the European Union and negotiating with the US a trade deal, one of the hugest issues that the Brits are worried about in entering into a trade deal is the selling off of our National Health Service, is entering into a trade deal that will somehow impinge on the freedom at the point of delivery of our National Health Service. So people incurring cost for accessing healthcare. And I think that's one of the big issues when we look across the pond and we say, wow, the Americans are paying an awful lot for healthcare. And having been here, it's a slightly muddier water than we were led to believe in the UK, actually, because we pay a large amount in tax. We pay nowhere near as much tax here. So when you add on our health insurances, it's less clear cut. But that free at the point of delivery, meaning that everybody, whoever you are, whatever you earn, wherever you're
basic
from,
human right.
a basic human right to good healthcare is something that I think, regardless of any other differences, people in the UK hold very strongly to. So I think that's one of the things that we look across the pond and say, gosh, we'd really struggle if we had a system similar to that.
And you've had good and bad experiences with your public healthcare system?
Yes, yeah, we have. We have had good experiences. Unfortunately, we were the victims of some negligence when our daughter was born, which meant we can't have any more children. And we thought very carefully at the time about suing our National Health Service because there was a clear admission of negligence. And we consulted with a lawyer, spoke about whether we should take legal action. And we thought long and hard about it. And in the end decided that it's very hard to sue a nationalised health service into which you're paying your tax. And actually the people who will benefit would only have been us. We would have been taking money straight back out of our nationalised health service. So negligence happens, I'm sure, here in the US too, in your healthcare system. I think the negligence that occurred was down to very poor staffing levels and the fact there weren't enough staff there that night and a very inexperienced doctor with no support, and then just lack of capacity. So I think it probably was a part of the nationalised nature of our health service, and the lack of funding the government put into it had a part to play. So in the end, there was that definite, we want someone to pay. This was not our plan. This was not how we planned our family. We bought a very large dining table with the intention of filling it with more children. And that wasn't the case. But it was, I think had we been here, maybe we would have sued somebody. I think in a different way. But again, but we've had very positive experiences as well. So one of those tough ones to call, really. Yeah.
And what about, because I know talking about Chick-fil-A, we had a little talk about that before, because you are also for same-sex marriage, and that is something that's not an issue in the UK, or is it an issue in the UK? Where it is an issue here, and I kind of told you some things about that of like,
absolutely.
I'm sorry to taint your Chick-fil-A, but
it's funny because Chick-fil-A just recently tried to open a branch in the UK in a town very close to where my parents live. And my dad, who's been here, who loves Chick-fil-A, was very excited about the prospect of being able to eat Chick-fil-A. And unfortunately in the UK, it was shut down because of people's understanding of Chick-fil-A's values. We In the UK, same-sex marriage is legal. It's been legal for quite a long time. We have perhaps a much greater separation, ironically, because you guys have a legal separation of church and state. And of course, we don't in the UK. We have the Queen, who is the head of our church and who is the head of our state. But faith and religion seems to play a much greater part politically and socially here. We're Christians. We are in the significant minority in the UK. We feel like we're much less in the minority here. But we don't stand in opposition to same-sex marriage. Has that brought us into conflict with our church? Absolutely.
Was that a conflict for you when you came to America to finding a church that had the same beliefs around same-sex marriage as you do?
It's a constant struggle to find our place within a church, within our values, within where we feel we should sit. We have some pretty strong views about women in leadership and women in eldership, and we were actually in a church in the UK whose views were transitioning, but were probably slightly different to our views, and we recognise the fact that we're unlikely ever to find a church where we completely agree with everything in the same way that any group of people are going to have differences. So we kind of try to prayerfully consider where we sit within our faith, where we sit politically, where we sit socially. It was probably less of an issue in the UK. Same with abortion. I think in the UK, I was in the minority as a pro-choice Christian, but there were other pro-choice Christians. I feel here there probably are pro-choice Christians, but I'm in the enormous minority, I would say, as pro-choice Christians here, and probably the same, I would say, maybe with same-sex marriage and with homosexuality. Again, our Church of England, which is kind of the head of the Anglican Church in the UK, has debated for years, and it has split apart, come back together about women in leadership, about gay marriage. So it's not something that the church in the UK in general has put to bed, but the debates are just, I think, in a different place.
So do you feel like Americans are a little behind in their open-mindedness on issues like this?
No, I mean, I've met some of the most faithful, deeply God-following people here. Certainly my faith has grown enormously in the last year being here. And I certainly wouldn't label people with different views to me necessarily as wrong or as overly conservative. I think we're all on a journey, whether we're Christians or not, in terms of our values, our politics and that kind of thing. And I certainly, my journey since becoming a mother has made me consider issues particularly around abortion more. Do you really still believe this, Claire? The Claire at 21 who was so militantly pro-choice in every circumstance, who had some very strong views, has travelled a distance, having become a mother, having met women who've had abortions, having met children who've been adopted, a whole range of different things. But I do think the American church is in a different place. And I think the debates the American church has, particularly because the political links that American churches have and the use of faith politically here and socially as well, is very different. And I think you're a country who has a lot more people who would claim to be Christians, who claim to have faith in some way. It's been really interesting, really, really interesting to see. But it's also led to some amazing discussions. We have some neighbours who are probably politically as far away from us as we could ever be. And yet the discussions we've had, the friendships we've developed are amazing. And I think one of the things we have learned is, because in the UK we lived in a very liberal, multicultural area, few people had different views to us. And here we're staring people in the face who have fundamentally different views about guns, about right to life, whether that's capital punishment, whether that's euthanasia, abortion. And it's been really, really interesting. And I've had to confront a lot of things that I thought I was very certain about. And all of a sudden, I'm not so certain anymore.
And you do a lot since coming here as far as volunteering. You volunteer at your child's school, and you work with an organization that you help teach English to refugees, correct?
I do, yeah.
And these refugees are not from the same area. They do not, let's say they do not look like you.
They don't look like
not
me.
white, petite white British women. And so they don't speak like you. They don't look like you. And I know that you have told me that they've had a very different experience coming into America and how they're treated and then how you were treated.
Definitely. And I'm not able, obviously, to say much about where they're from or the organisation I work with. But some of them have been here less time than I have, but quite a few of them have been here 4 or 5 years, 2, 3 years. And in speaking English with them, helping them understand, in my very kind of inadequate way, American culture, I've had a glimpse into their lives. And they definitely don't look like me. And the general affection that Americans hold the Brits in, I mean, has washed over us since we've been here. And that's not been the experience for the women I've worked with for a whole variety of reasons, because they are unable often to speak the language. They have a very different cultural tradition. They tend to stay in same-sex groups. And so their experience has been very, very different. But it's been, in some ways, uniquely similar, because the loneliness, and I know, Lisa, we've talked a lot about this, I hadn't experienced loneliness for maybe 20 years since I first went to college. And even then, just those first few days when you get to college and you think, oh, I don't know anyone, but then soon you're surrounded and you're fine. But the kind of intense loneliness that I wasn't expecting just the first 3 or 4 months, I share with these women. And we've been able to talk an awful lot about what it feels to be far from home, to not be able to get the food you like, to not be able to get the cultural experience necessary, to be completely taken aback by things like Halloween, by Thanksgiving, by trying to understand different things. And they've faced a level of prejudice, maybe at times. I know that some of them had very welcoming experiences, but that hasn't been their general experience. And for those of them who've had children who obviously go into schools, they may be the only children who are non-white there, the only children who may not speak English. Sometimes they go to schools where there are other children like them. And I think culturally it's been incredibly challenging for these women. And it's made me, again, realize that what I feel like my struggles here may have been nothing in comparison to that. But the resilience of these families has been quite astonishing to me. And we often sit and we'll just, after us.
And you teach these women, like, you just go in and you use Google Translate, and that's how you teach English.
Do.
Like, that must be, you have to have a lot of patience, I would feel like, because that would seem like it would take a long time to have a conversation.
We do, and
Google.
I'm learning their language. So they're teaching me their language, and they are learning English. I have got an amazing secondhand dictionary. So we are on phones, we are in dictionaries. They have some English. They have much more English than I have of their language. I'm pitifully beginning to learn fragments here and there. But there's a sense of womanhood that actually, I think, just transcends culture, language, any other barriers. And the things that we are naturally drawn to talking about, our children, our experiences, food, yet again, sharing, what we're cooking that night for our families has been fantastic. And you can, with fragmented English, but with hugs, smiles, facial expressions, drawings, and I have a whiteboard, a little mini whiteboard, so we draw things like crazy. It's been a really great experience. And it's also one of those things that you sometimes have to go back and really question. When you move countries or you're with people, you have to say, oh, all of these assumptions, all of these cultural assumptions I've had, whether it's about circumcision or tea or, how we live, are completely relative. And so we do go, and so they'll sometimes say to me, well, why is it this way? And I was trying to explain to them, I was saying to Lisa, income tax. And in where they come from, income tax doesn't exist in the same way. And I was explaining it. And if you don't trust your government, if you come from a place where you have a country maybe that's fundamentally unstable, or a country where the government is endemically corrupt, why would you be willing to give 20% of your income, 40% of your income to government? Of course you wouldn't, because you would be saying, well, what on earth are they going to be doing with this? And the social contract that we take for granted in the UK, here, in most of Europe, that, we may not like our leaders, we may not agree with certain things, but we think they're probably going to spend our money on what they say they're going to spend it on. Those cultural assumptions don't exist everywhere. And so we had a really interesting debate via Google Translate and various other things about income tax and corruption and various different things. So
I'm interested just so I know, and so you have a close contact with these women. Is it meaningful to them when they do get a smile at the grocery store, or they get a hello and they get treated with respect and dignity that they deserve, and not the you look different from me, so I'm going to shy away and let me step over here? I'm just curious, do they talk about that at all with you?
Yeah, I think we've had a couple of conversations about what it's been like, and they've been curious about my experiences. And they did ask me about the British Empire and say, well, didn't you own America once? And I said, well, a very long time ago, maybe we did.
Smart.
Yeah. And I think there have been a couple of conversations around that. I was pulled over by your lovely police officers because I was on the wrong side of the road in my car. And the police officer could not have been more lovely. As soon as I opened my mouth, he said, oh, you're British. And I said, yes, but I do understand I'm on the wrong side of the road. I know I've messed up. I'm very sorry. And he said, oh, this is just like in Jamaica. I've never been to Jamaica. I don't know how they drive, but I just nodded and smiled. And he said, hey, listen, I'm just going to stop the traffic. You do a U-turn. You have a nice day, and off you go. Now, in the UK, this would not have happened to me if I'd been driving on the wrong side of the road, or indeed if you had been driving on the wrong side of the road in the UK. I'm not entirely sure you would have gotten off with a smile and a U-turn. And I'm absolutely sure that the women I was speaking to felt that their experience may have been different had they been in the car, not me. I don't know if that would have been the case, but they felt that their experience may have been different.
Yeah. And I think it's just real important for me. And I just want to make sure, what can I do? What can I do? I don't know what I can do. Well, what I can do is, if I see someone that looks different, and even if they don't speak my language, I can smile and I can nod. And
I think that goes for anybody in the United States, right? That doesn't just have to be a refugee, regardless if we know if they are one or not.
Absolutely.
But just in general, right?
Right.
This isn't anything new, right?
Yeah. And
in
in
general,
general,
being kind to each other as another human being on this
and
planet.
I think in general, I found, again, before I even opened my mouth, so before people know I'm British, I look like you guys. I could very easily be an American woman stood in the park, stood in the grocery store. And the willingness generally of Americans to be friendly and to engage is fantastic. But I think it's perhaps when the visual is very different. And particularly, we live in a very white area. If the visual is different, there is sometimes a hesitance, and it's out of fear sometimes, or just out of, I don't know what to say. And I think it's just, I remember those first couple of months when I would drop my daughter off at school, my husband would go to work, and I would sit at home. And the only people I would speak to would be the mailman, the Amazon man, and whoever I spoke to at the grocery store. And those interactions at the grocery store, when I was desperately lonely, I would go a whole day without speaking to somebody. And I made friends with the woman at Safeway. And because she was literally one of the only people I spoke to in the week, these women feel just the same. They feel just as vulnerable. They feel just as lonely. And I think any time you can reach out to somebody is a positive. And how they receive it, how they choose to take it is then up to them. But I think that willingness just to be open, because there's the number of people who were just kind to me, genuinely the kindness of strangers. I burst into tears one day in a store here, and one of the members of staff was like, let's go and get a coffee. And she took me to the Starbucks in the store and she bought me a coffee.
Isn't that amazing?
And I would hope that if I'd looked different, that somebody would still have done that for me, because when you are very isolated and you feel very lonely and you feel completely at sea, I think it's those tiny moments that just give you that energy to pick yourself up and be like, okay, that's fine. I can carry on. There are good people here. It's all good. And I would like to think that however someone looked, that I would try to do that.
Yeah. I love that you just shared that story and you mentioned the word vulnerability at the grocery store.
Oh, and it's funny
right?
how I consider myself quite a resilient person. And I think to do this, you have to have an element of confidence and feel like, hey, we can literally turn our lives upside down. It's going to be fine. And there were moments of absolute real vulnerability. And I caught the flu because I didn't get my flu vaccination in the UK. And then I got here and I didn't even think about it. And I got the flu in maybe February time. And it happened to be a time when my husband was traveling. So he was away for a week, home for 3 days, away for a week. And so I was like laid in bed with the flu, kind of literally bundling myself into the car, driving Millie through the kiss and go lane, coming home. And I would have sold my soul at that point to move back to England and just would have been, I felt so vulnerable. And so, and it was friends and other things that kind of got me through. But it does make you realise, however secure we feel in life, that it doesn't take much actually to strip that away.
It doesn't.
However stable we think we are, however secure, it doesn't take much to just make you feel quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it certainly made me reflect on people who I probably in the UK wouldn't have even noticed who might have been lonely or vulnerable because my life was so busy and so chock-a-block full. But the experience, I've certainly looked, at lots of other people in a different way.
I had an experience at the grocery store the other day. It was just this past week where I was returning something and my cashier, it's had her name on her tag and it said, I speak Spanish. And I thought, I don't know what happened, but I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to ask her. I'm going to get vulnerable and ask her, can I practice my Spanish with you? Because not too long ago, I was walking a dog and I heard some landscapers speaking Spanish and I said, hola, ¿cómo estás? I got excited. I come from Boston. We have different languages there, Greek, Portuguese, Italian. I mean, and everyone, anything goes. And so I had told this story that I'd talked to these landscapers and I was told back, don't speak to them in their language. This was by something out. You need to speak to them in English. And it really bothered me. And so I haven't practiced. I haven't said hola to anybody. A lot of Mexicans, right? This is here in Colorado. So I looked at this girl. I said, does it offend you if I was to ask you to speak Spanish with you? And she kind of lit up. She got excited, right? And I was like, ooh, I just struck something with her. And she said, absolutely, I would enjoy that very much. And I said, I just wanted to double check. I had this experience one time that I was told not to, and it wasn't the landscapers that told me, this was just someone in my life. And she said, oh, I please, it says I speak Spanish, please speak Spanish with me. So she started speaking Spanish with me. And I was so delighted. And I tried to, we were doing it. And it really lit up her day. And then this vulnerability and this, oh my gosh, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to talk to people in their language.
Absolutely.
And that wall came down, right? And what a cool thing to talk about. Here we are today talking about such similar things.
Well, it's funny, in the UK, we've just had a report that's come out from a think tank that said that one of the reasons that the far right is on the increase in the UK is because of the unwillingness of certain migrant populations to assimilate with the UK. And I was listening to this and I was thinking, first of all, I'm not sure we can blame people's violent radicalism on the immigrant community. It's their response. Let's not victim blame here. Let's not do that. But also, to an extent, I can understand an expectation that if you come to a country, that you will accept certain cultural norms, that you will accept the law, certainly. But wouldn't we be so much poorer if all of the people who had moved to our countries, and we were talking about 23andMe last night, weren't we, Lisa, and about how we haven't done it, but Lisa has, and we're so excited to find out maybe Lisa might be more British than we are. But we're all a blend, and how sad would it be if we hadn't shared where we'd come from? We'd be missing out on pizza. Right. Amazing Chinese food.
Tacos, queso.
But also our languages are made up of bits and bobs from all over the place. So while I have, to an extent, an understanding of that, well, hey, you're moving to our country, so you need to accept who we are and what our values are.
Yeah.
who we are isn't binary. Who we are has been shaped by hundreds, if not thousands of years of people coming with their traditions, with their language. There's so much in English that's come from French, that's come from Latin and other languages. So to then say, well, hey, you should only be speaking to them in English because heaven forbid, that they should speak in their language and bring their culture to us. We're all the poorer.
Yeah.
We're all So when I was listening to this think tank report being reported on the BBC, and I was thinking, I just don't think this is telling the whole story, because actually when we say to people, you're coming here, you're not integrating, we're devaluing it, what they have to bring to our culture. Now, if they're bringing illegal practices, if they're bringing, for example, FGM, now those are cultural norms that aren't and shouldn't be acceptable anywhere. But if we can't share each other's food, each other's music, the diversity of our
boring
language,
would our world be,
and fashion. I've seen some astonishing fashion come out of Spain, out of North Africa, out of France. Why would we want to limit ourselves? To those kind of expressions when we could include it so much more. So that must have been really sad for you to have someone say. It was
because I thought to myself immediately, I took 5 years of Spanish. I was told by the American schooling back, in high school and in middle school, I had to take either French, Spanish. I think it was either French or Spanish. I can't think of any other.
That's what the choices are
so
now.
5 years I studied this, and now I'm being told I can't practice it here. And that was really the only time that anybody gave me a hard time. But it was one of those crystallizing moments where it stamped in my brain. And ever since, it's maybe been a year or two, and I've been wanting to speak Spanish because I think I'm good at it too. And I enjoy it, And I went back east not too long ago. I sat down on a park bench. This man started speaking Spanish to me. He asks me, "Oh, are you married? Do you have any children?" And I was able to respond. And I didn't, there wasn't any hesitation. I didn't care. It was fun, if anything. So, but I have learned, especially growing up in Boston, it was just so fantastic, all that Greek food and learning the Greek language. And,
absolutely.
It's neat. It's cool. And I'm glad that I talked about that, because I don't think I've talked about that since it happened.
But also, isn't it funny how the power of negativity can sometimes cast such a long shadow? Because when I look back, I can still remember from a kid, if someone said something particularly cutting or critical, it's funny how you can hold on to that. And it's so, and again, the women I work with, I think it doesn't take many negative experiences to make people close up.
Yeah. And broadly, this organization that you work for, it is putting in touch refugees specifically?
Oh, yeah, women who are brought here.
Yeah, because they were forced out of. I was actually just looking up what a refugee is. So they had to leave their country. They were forced to leave their country
under some circumstances. Yeah, some of them have come here under other arrangements as well. But they are certainly here because of what's gone on where they've come from.
Gotcha.
Due to instability or persecution or a whole range of
And they're putting
issues.
them in touch with people like you who are connecting them with this culture and giving, just a voice, right? And then are they also providing them places to live? Is this kind of like a...
They're helped more broadly as well by both the US state and by various charities within the area as well, and most of them have families. They have kids in local schools, and we were talking just on Thursday about health insurance, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is pressure because I'm not
with Google Translate.
Yeah, I'm not incredibly sure. I know a little bit about the US healthcare system, so we kind of fudge it through. But in a way, I think that's quite nice because we're on a journey together, and there are certain things. One of the women I work with has been here 4 or 5 years, and sometimes I'll turn to her and say, "Hey, do you know about this?" Yeah. Because as someone who's been here just a year, so it's wonderful in that way, and it's certainly more of a friendship now than anything else.
And for listeners who are interested in doing this kind of work, are you able to share anywhere that they can get in touch with? Could they get in touch with you? Is there any in a broad sense?
Yeah, I think there's loads of US charities that provide exactly this kind of support. So I imagine depending on the area that you're in, if you plug into Google, kind of working with refugees, obviously politically at the moment, the US is accepting fewer refugees and bringing people in in fewer numbers. But there is always this kind of volunteering opportunities available. And yeah, I would really encourage it. I mean, I probably spend half a day a week, maybe a day, if it includes kind of the planning, and if I'm researching various different things and doing bits and bobs. But there's loads of things you can do through local churches. Lots of churches seem to have links, because you have such a plurality of churches and that kind of thing as well. So many churches do this kind of work, but also there are loads of charities, and often they're area specific.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, definitely worth having a Google. Yeah.
And I love, just, before we wrap up here, that something that you said that has really tied into a larger theme of this podcast is women helping other women. And like you were speaking about, when you're meeting with these women, that you just instantly have this connection as womanhood and the things that you can able to talk about. And they're from a completely different place than we are, completely different place than you are. And you're both in a totally new place for both of you. And you can still have this connection just because you're just a woman helping another woman. And it's just amazing. It's an amazing, beautiful thing. And that's like really been a huge thing, a theme for this podcast with everybody that sat in that chair over there. None of them could get where they have gotten or us without, other women helping. I think it's really amazing. And I think it's really amazing that you have, you've had so much going on. You've uprooted your family, you've came here, and you're choosing, your first thought almost is how can I give back and how can I help someone else? And I think that's one of the things that draws me to you as a person. And that I told Corey before you got here, you have the biggest heart. I think you're probably one of the most kindest people I've ever met in my life. And I'm so
Lisa,
happy to have
you've
you.
not seen me at 8 a.m. on the school run. That's very kind, but yeah, on the school run, well, before the school run, get out of the house. if you met me before my first cup of tea, you might say different, but thank you.
But thank you so much.
This
This has been so
here.
much fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claire. If you have an interesting story, something funny, something sad, something you want the world to know, please email us. We want you to share your experiences with us. We'll take these, we'll collect them, we'll do some episodes sometimes where we'll read them. So if you want to be anonymous, please just let us know. We won't read your name. If you want your name read, then we will. But send us those stories, comments, to info@herturntotalkpodcast.com. And we also ask, if you like what you're hearing, please rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you.